Hola a todos, bienvenidos. Yo soy Gwen Philbrook del periódico The New York Times y quería solamente decir que es un honor para nosotros estar aquí en Madrid, a la invitación de la ciudad de Madrid, a llevar nuestro programa de Times Talks aquí para presentarlos todos ustedes. Y ahora para decirles un poquito de nuestros invitados especiales de esta noche, les presento a mi colega Carol Olsen-Day del New York Times.
Our guest tonight is an award-winning actor, and you've seen many of his films and his stage performances. He first won an Academy Award for The Reversal of Fortune. He's recently performing or on screen in The Words with Bradley Cooper, and he just, aside from his fictional characters, he has executive produced a new, exciting, and important documentary about the environment called Trashed, which he also appears in and traveled the world to do. His profession has awarded him its highest honors. Besides the Academy Award, a Golden Globe, an Emmy, a Tony, the Screen Actors Guild Award, among many others. Here to interview him tonight is a reporter who covers theater. He works in the London office of the International Herald Tribune, which is the global edition of the New York Times. He covers everything about the stage and what brings it to life, including tonight's guest, whom he first interviewed in 1984, and for the paper, the New York Times, profiled him in 1991. So please join me in welcoming London-based reporter Matt Wolfe and our very special guest, Jeremy Irons.
Well, that's a very nice Spanish welcome.
No ole.
Jeremy, do you know Madrid? Is this a city that you've been to before?
I don't know it, but I've been to it 4 or 5 times. Tends to be in and out quite quickly. This time I'm here for 3 or 4 days, so I'm getting to know it better this time than I've known it before.
And of course, this is, I gather, and I don't think Jeremy will mind me telling the crowd that this is a bit of a birthday weekend since you've just had a birthday. So happy birthday.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming. It seems whenever we have the occasion to chat that one of the prevailing themes, of course, of your career is diversity, variety. You seem never to repeat yourself. And we're going to talk tonight particularly about the things you've done most recently, which are about as diverse as any quartet of works can be. And it occurred to me that the fact that you've recently played a king, a pope, a character called the Old Man, and yourself is pretty extraordinary. Just before we go into the individual works, how important is it for you to do something different each time?
It's very important. I have a very low boredom threshold, and I need to keep myself interested, and therefore I need to keep doing different things. It's one of the problems sometimes in my acting, because film acting particularly is quite a boring process. I look at my performances and I think, yeah, you were bored. You were doing much too much there. You should have just done nothing. But I get easily bored. I need a strong director to tell me just to stay still and stop it.
So how do you decide on a project? Or let me put it another way, do you turn a lot down?
I turn a moderate amount down. I mean, the sad thing about the business is there's not a lot of good work about. And when it comes my way, I grab it.
And interestingly, and this will segue into the first of the films of yours we're going to talk about, The Words, it doesn't seem to matter to you whether it's a starring role, a supporting role, because the words is a smallish part for you, but a very important one. Is that quite nice as you get older, not to have to carry a film?
It is. I mean, one's always interested in the story. Is it an interesting story? And the character. Is it an interesting character? The length of the character isn't really important, as long as he will be interesting to play, and the story is a story which I would like to go and see.
Well, I think, and we'll carry on with this, but let's start with a clip from The Words, which hasn't come out yet in Spain, so all of you can have a sense of what we're talking about as we carry forward. So we'll have a clip from The Words. Wonderful. It's a really interesting film because it's a lot of different things, isn't it? It's sort of a thriller, kind of a moral inquiry. It puts ethics center screen, and it also believes in writing and in literacy, which are two things that are rather nice to believe in. What was your attraction to this particular material?
It's based on, I think, an occurrence which happened to Hemingway,
right,
who lost a manuscript, whose wife lost his manuscript and was never found. I, strangely enough, did it because Laura Rister, who was one of the producers on Margin Call, once again, a small movie I made in New York, and she did so well by the movie. She took such care of it. And she said, I have another movie I want you to do, but it's an old man. I don't know if you'll mind playing that. And I read the script, and I was intrigued by it. Bradley Cooper, who I hadn't met, is clearly a rising star. Two new directors who wrote the story. That's always a risk. But I thought it's an intelligent adult film. Why not do it? It didn't take too long from my life.
You mentioned playing a character called the Old Man, and you're forever young. What did you think about playing a character with that name? Did you think, hang on a minute?
No, I thought, that's a character performance. I'm going to need a lot of makeup for that.
It's interesting, of course, manuscripts are crucial to the film. And it seems these days, Jeremy, every third actor I come across is all of a sudden an actor turned writer, or has the novel or the memoir.
Really?
Do you have something on your computer that you're waiting to press send?
Now, I wrote a script a while ago with a friend, about 10 years ago, and never had the guts to produce it, which I'm rather sorry about. I don't know. Now and again, I return to it and I reread it, and I think, this is very good. This is a lot better than most of what I get sent. But no, I haven't had the courage to go further with it.
Would you ever write a memoir? Do you sort of think of your life in those terms?
No, I wouldn't really like. I think it would be too embarrassing for me and for everybody I've moved against in my life to write a memoir, which has to be a true memoir in order to mean anything. Mm-hmm. I'd like, I think, maybe I could write a very thin book about the things I've learned.
Yes. You mentioned working with young filmmakers, relative neophytes, and you've also worked with, greatly accomplished veteran filmmakers. What's the difference working on a movie with, say, Soderbergh, or a theater of Mike Nichols' film as well, a real veteran and then first-timers or neophytes? Is that off-putting, or is that actually part of the excitement?
It's part of the excitement, and there's no way of saying, oh, it's easier with experienced directors than young directors. It's not. It's always difficult. I think directors always find it difficult. The best directors, for me, are the ones who don't know anything, who we discover the story. And I think that's how I would divide directors, not experienced and inexperienced, but those who don't know and those who think they know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you, because of course when we first met, we met talking about plays that you were doing at the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford, and of course the thing about doing a play, it seems to me, is you know immediately how it's going over because you're doing it in front of an audience that matinee or evening. How aware are you when you're doing a film of what it might become?
Very unaware. You just do your best. You do every scene the best you can. You tell the story as best you can. But as Cronenberg said to me one day, he said, I can't wait for this film to come out so the critics can tell us what it's about. And that's sort of the nature of it. It's a bit like making wine. You know, you grow it, you watch the weather, you feed it the grapes and all of that, and then you press it, and then you put it in a barrel, and then you, every now and again, you taste it, and you think, well, I hope this is going to be all right, but you don't know.
Are you an actor who looks at the rushes, who wants to see what the director's seeing through the lens, or do you just let him or her get on with it?
It depends on the scene, it depends on the director. Once I've got entire confidence in the director, then I tend not to watch it, although sometimes I'll just watch it out of interest. And of course now we always have playback, video playback after every scene, so you can do a take and go and watch it and see how you can improve it depending on the nature of the shot. That's sometimes useful. But on emotional scenes, strange enough, I don't, because emotional scenes you have to stay very much within the scene for all the takes and the different angles. But for a scene which is geographic, which has things happening, things moving, it's often useful to look, to realize that, oh, if I turn a little bit later, it's going to help that moment. So there's no general rule is the answer. But I use myself very much as an instrument. I watch myself and I think, is this working? What that guy's doing, is it working?
So with these young men behind the words, it must have been fascinating because, of course, they were burning to make this, and passion, I assume, is very important.
Passion is very important indeed. Bradley Cooper was a childhood friend of theirs. They went to school together.
Right, okay.
And so it was really his saying he'd do the movie, which got the movie up and running. They were very close, but very, you know, in Bradley they had a good, if you have good actors and you have a good script, then it's quite hard to make it go too wrong as a director.
Where was that shot that we were looking at? Where was that
We
filmed?
shot it in Montreal.
Okay.
Yeah. The poor man's New York.
Yes, Montreal does a lot of standing in these days for New York. With other work that you do, is it very important who else is in it? You mentioned Bradley Cooper in this. Sometimes I assume you're the first person cast. Sometimes you're cast further down the line. Does that make a difference to you? What's kind of the moment when you go, yes, I'm in?
It differs with every movie. Margin Call I was very late in, and I could see there was an amazing lineup of cast, and that in a way, that makes you feel, well, I think my judgment's right, it is a good script. A lot of other people thought it was a good script. The Words, Bradley was in, and I thought, well, he has a lot of choice at the moment, so there's a reason to do it. It depends. It's a gut feeling. You know, it's when you sit down, you see a table of food in front of you, and you think, what do I want? I think I want that and that. Now, the next day, you might think, I think I'd like one of those. You know, so it's purely, if you listen to your appetite, you listen to your gut.
I think for many of us, one of your most extraordinary performances, of course, remains your performance in Dead Ringers. And was that a no-brainer from the get-go? Or did you think, this is pretty weird?
I was worried because, you know, film is a very technical medium, and there's a lot, the technical stuff can get in the way of performance sometimes, I think. What film acting is about is ignoring all that technical stuff. And I thought, well, if I have to play twins, identical twins, there's going to be a lot of technical stuff. And is that going to, you know, is that going to get in the way? And so Cronenberg, too, convinced me. We did a day working not on film, but on video, but using the same techniques. And it was incredibly easy. And I thought, oh, well, this is all right. This is not going to be difficult, any harder than a normal film. And I was so fascinated with the challenge of playing two identical people who the audience could tell apart. I thought this has to be tried.
And what happens over time when a decade passes, 2 decades, and you think, I wonder how that movie holds up? Do you want to look at a movie again, or do you think that's it? Or do you actually say, let's see how Reversal of Fortune looks on a Saturday night?
you fall up against it. I mean, I have them all in some cupboard. They're all there. But you fall over them. I fell over the Mission about 3-4 years ago. They did a screening in Los Angeles and said, would I go? And I happened to be in town, so I did. And I was amazed. When you're a long way away from a movie, you can see it very clearly. Normally you make a movie and then you do all the publicity and you see it 2 or 3 times, but you're still sort of caught up in it. And then a long number of years pass, and in this case with the Mission, about 20 years, and you look at it and you can see it you're not involved at all, and you see this, well, I saw this young man, and I thought, he's very like my son. And I saw it as a fresh audience would see it. The other day, we showed in Dublin a film called Waterland, which I'd made with my wife, Sinead Cusack, and they had shown it 20 years before when they opened a certain cinema, and they wanted to re-show it 20 years later. And I was able to see it once again, like an audience, and I found it immensely emotional, and I didn't find myself judging or feeling how it was to make. Enough time had passed. I could see it quite objectively and judge it quite objectively, and thought it was rather good, actually.
And in fact, one of the times we met was on a movie that you did with your older son and your father-in-law, with Sam and Cyril. That must be extraordinary to go back to because, of course, it's a reminder of a particular time in a family.
Yes, and I haven't seen that for a long time. That was very tough for my son. He made it when he was 9, and then he went to school. And when you're 9, you grow up very quickly. I mean, when you're 2 years later, you're 11, and you're completely different. And then you're 13, and you're completely different. And people keep showing this film where you were 9, and it's very embarrassing. And in fact, he had one of his schoolmasters said to him, if you don't start doing better work, I'm going to show Danny to the whole class.
That's lovely.
But it'll be there to see again.
We should mention only because, or partly because, the director of the stage musical version of it is going to be sitting where you are on Sunday night. Of course, one of your most commercially successful films was obviously voicing Scar in The Lion King, and Julie Taymor, who directed the stage musical, will be here on Sunday with us. That must have been a different thing again, animated, doing a voice, and not having any idea what the sweep of that would end up being.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. I hadn't done an animated picture before, and I was working, I think, at Stratford doing Shakespeare, and they said, will I play this lion? And I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. And the process is fascinating. I mean, I always imagined that they drew the pictures, and then the actors sort of stood there and tried to fit the words to what they'd drawn. But no, we met, I suppose, about 6 or 8 times all over the world over a period of about 2 years, and there would be a storyboard, so you sort of see what was going to happen. And then you'd sit in the booth and you'd try lines, different lines, and the artists who drew the animal would be sitting there watching you and sketching you as you were recording and videoing you, so that they would try to get some of your quality into the actual animation, which I found very disturbing when I saw it finally, because he was such a mangy lion. You know, James Earl Jones was all big and rippling and wonderful, and I was this sort of awful, and I thought, oh dear, I must put on some weight and do something about my hair.
And what did you think, and I say this because Julie will be here, what did you think when you heard it was going to be a Broadway musical? Did you think that's bizarre?
I did think it was bizarre, and then I went to see it on Broadway, and I was blown away. Mm-hmm. I mean, wonderful theatrical invention, just incredible.
Yes, yes. Now, the next clip that we're going to show is from something very different for you, as far as I know, not just a documentary, very politically and emotionally engaged, but you also executive produced it. This is a film called Trashed, and we'll talk about how this came to be, your involvement both as narrator and producer, which is a first for you, isn't it? So let's show a clip from Trashed, and then we'll hear how it came to be. very sobering film, obviously, and an important film. As executive producer, does that mean, did you initiate the film, or did Candida Brady bring you on board and then you produce, or what was the cause and effect?
Candida Brady is a near neighbor of mine in England, and she's a documentary filmmaker. She used to be a journalist. She used to write for the Daily Mail, I think. And we wanted to make a film about gypsies, about Romanis, because I'm fascinated by the dislike that settled people have for mobile people in the world, whether it be Mongolia or Spain, Madrid. However, we couldn't sell the idea to anybody. And so she then said, listen, I've had this idea about making a film about waste, about rubbish, about trash. What do you think? And I said, give me some information. So she gave me a lot of stuff to read, and I read it, and I thought, we have to make this. It's a very important subject. It's a subject, it's not just a subject of doom, it's a subject we can do something about, but we have to make people aware of what needs to be done and how bad the situation is and how relatively simple it is to cure. And so I then came on board and I think helped with the fundraising for it and to a certain extent the structure and then the post-production, just how we do it.
How did you define the parameters of it? Because, of course, sadly and tragically, the topic it describes is truly global.
Yeah, it is.
So how do you begin to decide where you're going to focus?
Well, budget tells you quite a lot.
Right. Yes.
Budget and time. We shot it last summer, and I was very busy last summer, so I didn't have a lot of time for many world trips. But we went to Iceland and Lebanon and Vietnam, San Francisco, Indonesia. We didn't sadly get to China, where we wanted to look at the problem there also. But I think we saw enough places to make people realize it was a global problem. And enough places of different sort of wealth levels. So we could see it wasn't anything to do with being poor. I mean, Indonesia, it is appalling. But Los Angeles, it's appalling too. But really it was time and budget, yeah.
And it isn't third world or first world.
No.
It's the world.
It's the world, yeah.
How sort of important was it that Al Gore, the American politician, had won an Oscar for a comparable film, you know, that engages with topicality in the world and wants to push the idea of betterment?
I think it's very important. I think he opened the door to documentaries as being an important part of why we watch a screen. That films don't only have to be fictional dramas, that documentaries can make money for a start, which is good because, you know, you've got to get investors and they want to get their money back if they invest in a film. So I think Al's picture was very important. And I have to say I'm amazed. I mean, Candy originally came to me and said, let's make this for television. I said, no, let's make it as a feature, because I think there is a life for it as a feature. And the reaction we've been getting, I mean, it's going now to about 10 film festivals around the world. And once the way you do it, you market them at film festivals and then you spread. And then what we're hoping to do, for instance, in America is to get a copy of the DVD into every school of America. And I would love the same thing in Spain, because the people we have to educate are not just the politicians, but the young. Because when the young are appalled by something, they grow up with that knowledge that that situation is unacceptable. And I think it's something that should be seen at schools, in cinemas and in the schools, and also by government. We showed it a fortnight ago in New York to the Mayor's Council and many city councillors. And they, of course, have a huge problem. America itself, I think, creates 33% of the world's trash. New York recycles 15%. Los Angeles recycles 75%, and they're working towards getting 80% recycle. So it is possible.
I think very often with films like this, sometimes they're sobering and they have, you know, a salutary effect, but at the end people come away and they go, well, what can I do? You know, it's a heinous situation, but it's not going to change. Does this film actually set out an agenda for change that the individual can take on board?
It does, although we need organizing. We have to have the city council on our side because we need to have 3 separate bins so that food goes one place, recyclable plastics go another place, paper and burnables go another place. And in order to do that, we need to have an organized system. And we need to know that when we use our 3 bins, that they're going to be properly dealt with. I mean, a lot of the wine that is drunk in California is grown using composted waste. We waste 45% of the food we grow in the world. And we all argue about GM crops, because GM crops are supposed to make us grow more. But we waste 45% of what we grow now. Now, that is ludicrous when there's a shortage of food in the world. So when supermarkets offer us 2 for 1, we should throw the one on the floor. We should throw all the packaging on the floor, too. We should buy without packaging and say, I don't want 2 for 1. I only want 10 tomatoes. I don't want 20. If I have 20, they'll all go off. The 10 will go off. So we're wasting food. We have to re-educate people in the way they buy and the way they won't allow packaging. If you get these packets, buy a pair of scissors, for instance, and you actually have to cut your way through the plastic to get into those scissors often in many stores. Now that should be done, I believe, when at the checkout. Cut through them, leave the stuff on the floor so that the retailers can go back to the wholesalers and say, we can't have all this, we don't need this packaging, and don't package your products in this way. But it has to start with us, and everybody can do, you know, one thing. If you can buy your food without packaging, do. If you can buy just enough, do. If you can buy seasonal food at farmers' markets, do. Don't buy. I ate some strawberries the other day. They'd obviously come, I think, because the strawberry season's over, from Israel or from South Africa. They were uneatable. They didn't taste of strawberries. They looked like strawberries. They were uneaten. I thought, why has somebody wasted their money? It was very nice. It was at a hotel, and they'd given to me in my room, and I thought, it's lovely. Strawberry. Oh, God, it's terrible. But strawberries in season for that month, those 4 weeks when they come out, are delicious, especially if they're grown around the corner. So I think we have to just slowly re-educate ourselves, and we have to know the dangers. And one of the things the film shows are the dangers to us, the dangers of incinerating our rubbish, what dioxins in the air which fall to ground do to us, what they do to the animals in the ocean, because there's a huge amount of plastic floating around in tiny particles in the ocean, being eaten up the food chain. And finally, those at the top of the food chain, which are the killer whales, are finding it very difficult to reproduce.
But I would imagine, Jeremy, this is one film in which the director's cut will be really interesting because presumably there was a lot of stuff you just couldn't put in the final edit. Or is it all there?
Most of it's there, actually. Most of it's there. Yeah, I mean, had we had a bigger budget, maybe there would have been a lot of stuff not there. But we were pretty careful about what we shot. And then we got Vangelis. I showed it to a friend of mine, Vangelis, who's a musician, you know, composer, and I said, what do you think of this? And he said, I'll write the music now. So he's written our music. And I hope when it comes to Madrid that it affects everybody and that it gives people an idea of what they can do to help change the system.
And it's worth telling the audience, if any of you are going to be in London next weekend, that there is a gala premiere of it.
There's a premiere showing at the Rain Dance
at the
Festival,
Apollo Piccadilly on the 29th.
On the 29th, if you happen to be in London. But
but then that's adding to the carbon footprint.
That's true.
Yes.
That's true.
What do you think, Jeremy, about the actor as activist, which is an interesting phenomenon? I mean, it happens a lot in America. Sean Penn, Angelina Jolie, Jane Fonda, they find an issue or there's a cause, and sometimes there's a film connected to it or a documentary, television, and then other actors say, no, I just do my work and the rest of my life is separate. In this, your passions are feeding the work. Is that something that you think is important to do?
I think, what we want to try and do in our lives is leave the place a little bit better or happier because of our presence. Actors have a great possibility to influence because people know them, and therefore maybe listen to them more than Joe Bloggs, or will give money to an idea because an actor is in it. So we do have a certain power. Doesn't mean we're right, any righter than any politician, but it means that if we have something we believe in, why not try and disseminate that opinion? I don't think you should or shouldn't, just if you care to do it. But I don't think actors are any more valid than somebody who has no name, who feels very passionately. But I think we all, in a way, try to express our opinions and to change people's minds about things in every walk of life that we have. It's just that actors have the use of a screen.
You rightly mentioned the power that the actor has, and that's a wonderful segue to, I guess, our last section of the discussion. Before we open it up to questions from you, and please do be thinking of questions for the last quarter of an hour, which has to do with people in power, of whom you've played an interesting duo recently, an aging Shakespearean king on television, a wonderful sequence produced by the BBC called The Hollow Crown, in which Jeremy co-starred. Another actor in it will be a guest here tomorrow night, Tom Hiddleston, and then, of course, the Borgias. Before we get to the Borgias, the Hollow Crown television, an extraordinary thing to do those Shakespeare histories. I mean, the Richard Eyre, Henry IV, 1 and 2, felt like a movie. It was properly cinematic. What was your feeling about it as somebody who's done Shakespeare on stage?
I thought it worked wonderfully. Richard, I mean, you have to cut Shakespeare for the screen because movies have to be sort of 90 minutes. And I think Henry IV is probably 2.5 hours. So about an hour was cut out. But then Shakespeare was writing for a little theatre which had no scenery even. On a movie, you can show a huge amount that needs explaining in a play. So you can cut a lot anyway and drive the drama faster and more excitingly. And I thought Richard Eyre had made a wonderful adaptation of the two plays. And strangely enough, I think I played the king, Henry IV, and I think the king is much more interesting in Richard's version than in the stage play, where he has an awful lot of guff and keeps talking, and I think most people nod off when he's on. A lot of that was cut from the film. And as a result, I think it was tremendously powerful, and I hope will pull new audiences to Shakespeare in our country, certainly.
It's a really beautiful performance and beautiful film. Give us a little heads up, Jeremy, on your son in the film, Tom Hiddleston, who will be here tomorrow night. Nice guy, good actor?
Tom is a glorious actor. He played my son. He played Prince Hal in Henry IV, and then he went on to play Henry V, When I Die, in the play of Henry V. And he is a really glorious actor who I hadn't worked with before. You can sort of believe he's my son. In fact, I used to look at him. He's much more good-looking than I am. And I used to look at him thinking, oh, yeah, that's my son. Yeah, that's how my son will be. But he's a good actor, has a wonderful clarity and openness, which I think you'll discover tomorrow. And I think he has a great career ahead of him.
Well, we don't have a clip from Henry IV, 1 and 2, but we will have a clip from Henry V tomorrow, so you'll see some of that then. We do, of course, have a clip from the Borgias, which Jeremy has continued to film and, in fact, is here for the weekend, taking a break and goes back on Monday to Budapest to continue filming season 3, you say?
Season 3, yeah.
But before we talk about the show in any more detail, let's show a clip from the Borgias. Pretty juicy stuff. By contrast with the words, where you came and did your thing and left, you're at the center of this. How did it come about? A no-brainer?
No, not a no-brainer, because It's a television series, which I haven't done since Brideshead Revisited, which was, I don't know, 30 years ago. And I used to think, I don't want to do television because you put all the effort into it and then everyone's watching the football on the other side. But of course, now the business has changed. For a start, everybody's able to see stuff when they want to, with sort of, I don't know what they're called, but all those things where you can delay it or see it tomorrow night or whatever. So that's changed. But also, independent film has changed. It's much harder now to get a sort of mid-budget film made than it was 15 years ago. And so much of the good writing, especially in America, has moved into television, often cable. And you're getting these wonderful series like Boardwalk Empire, The Wire, you know, you could go on, The Killing from Denmark. These really first-rate series with great writing, and actors will always follow the quality writing. And so you're finding actors who you would have seen on film 15 years ago now working in television. Glenn Close, you know, doing a continual series. And so Neil Jordan, who is a man who I knew I hadn't worked for. We talked about things, but we never got it together. He said to me, I'm going to make a series of the Borgias. He had been trying to make a film of it for 10 years. And Steven Spielberg had said to him, why don't you make it as a television? And he said, well, I don't know television. He said, well, learn to write for that. And he said to me, would you like to play Rodrigo Borgia? And I Googled him, which is something I am able to do, and discovered that he was a very fat man, very Spaniard, of course, big hook nose and a great, you know, and I thought, oh, I said to Neil, I said, you've got to get someone else. I mean, I'm hardly that. And he said, it doesn't matter. He said, it doesn't matter what he looked like. You can play all that stuff. So because Neil was involved, because it was Showtime, who I sort of admired what they were trying to do in America, I said, yes, let's do it.
It's a real bodice ripper, though. I mean, it's full of sex and violence and you name it. I noticed that the British press have had some rather pun-filled titles for it. One newspaper called it The Orgias, another newspaper called it Cardinal Knowledge. Is part of it that you can have fun with it?
It is. I mean, the Borgias are very difficult because they come down in history with the most terrible reputation. Cesare Borgia, Lucrezia Borgia, the Pope. They were vilified by the two popes after him, played in the series by Della Rovere, who then becomes, I think, Pope Pius the something. And he hated the Borgias, and he slandered and libeled them dreadfully. Said they were an incestuous family, which I don't think probably they were, and that they behaved appallingly. Well, people did, I mean, life was worth less in those days. The stakes for political power were maybe higher. Things were moving in that part of Italy. People were jogging for position. And so, to our eyes, they probably did behave as badly as people behaved in Spain, maybe, at the time. But what we wanted to try to get was not just the sort of salaciousness, but also to try to create characters who had a reason to behave, perhaps in that way. And indeed, it is a bit, I suppose, on the nose sometimes. I don't know. It's quite fun. It is a bodice ripper, I suppose.
Well, to whet the audience's appetite, just maybe you can give us a sense of what happens in this third current season. In other words, where does this narrative have to go? Where is it going to take us?
Well, he was Pope for 12 years, and then he died. They're not quite sure whether he was poisoned or whether he got something, but he was black, and they couldn't fit him in his coffin. Well, I suppose we may be doing a fourth, and I suppose at the end of the fourth, someone's going to be shoving me in a coffin. But where do we go this year? We go with with what have you seen? Have you seen series 2 here? Ah, you haven't. Ah, right.
So
well,
a lot to catch up on.
We've sort of settled into Rome, and I'm now trying to deal with my very disparate family, who all have their own agenda. So really, series 2 is about familial conflict, which ends in a pretty powerful way. I think it's very good, series 2.
It's interesting that we're closing this bit of the discussion with the Borgias because, Jeremy, when you first came to attention, of course, in Brideshead, and I remember being in the States watching that while I was at university, and it just was such a pristine and elegant and wondrous vision of England. And, you know, it was sort of exalted for its Englishness. But so much of your career seems to be about playing against your Englishness. The Borgias being part of it, but Klaus von Bülow, many other roles.
Yeah.
Is that true to say?
I think so. I think I made a decision very early on, actually after Brideshead and French Lieutenant's Woman, which came out about the same time, both playing archetypal Englishmen. And I thought, well, the movie industry is American-led. And the way Americans see the English is a little bit two-dimensional. Probably as they see the Spanish too. I mean, if you see a Spaniard in an American movie, it's probably, you know, or like that. And Englishmen, the same. And I thought, I don't want to be boxed in to be playing sort of David Niven for the rest of my life. So I then went and worked with Skolimowski on
Moonlighting.
Moonlighting, it was called. That's right. To play a Pole. And then made a film in France and tried to sort of broaden, and then Kafka. Because I thought I'd have more fun.
Just lastly, before we open up to the audience, I just wonder, you have the younger of your two sons, Max, is now himself an actor. Is that interesting for you, watching the profession that he's entering, given the profession that you entered 30 years ago? Does it seem totally different? Do you give him advice?
It is totally different. And I tried advice. You have to learn yourself. I mean, when I became an actor, it was very important to spend a lot of time in theatre to sort of ground yourself, to practice in the dark, you know, without too many people seeing your mistakes. Nowadays in England, we don't have that large selection of theatre that we had in my day. And there is such an appetite for young, good-looking film actors. And Max is young and good-looking. And I'm just very glad that he seems to have a modicum of talent, which I hope will carry him through. But I think the thing that makes me the gladdest is not that he does seem to have a modicum of talent, but that he's very happy doing what he's doing. And really all you want for your children is for them to be happy. And he's shooting at the moment in Bruges in Belgium. He's playing Edward II, I think, in a historical drama, rather like the Borgias, but set earlier. And I talked to him the other night, and he's incredibly happy with just doing it. And that makes my heart sing.
Well, we will now be incredibly happy to take questions from any of you. So let's put on these earphones. And I will repeat the question just so that there's no confusion. So raise your hand, and yes, gentleman just there.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Irons. Great pleasure.
Thank you.
One of the most terrific films in my life is Margin Call, because it's so real that it's real terror. Well, I would like knowing what you felt and what you thought performing the chief of such a boat of, I would say, of trash, of immoral trash that you perform, all the team, but you were the chief of that trash.
Just to
How
repeat,
do you felt?
Just to repeat a question about Margin Call, the film that Jeremy did.
I made that film very quickly. I didn't have a huge amount of preparation, so I had one book that I educated myself with about the financial situation, which the story was based around. I knew it was based on the on two particular people. My character was based on two particular people, but I wasn't able to meet them or watch them or do anything. So I thought, well, I'll just play. If you're at the top of a business like that, you're your own man, and you don't understand everything, which is why you have people below you who do understand, and they have people below them who understand even more. And I took, with that very general attitude, I just played the script. And our director, his father was in the business, J.C. Chandra's father, and so it was very accurate what was being portrayed. And the script was well written, and I just trusted that the script was right. And played somebody whose job it was to keep the ship afloat and not look at all into the morality of it. But his job was to keep it afloat, to keep the company afloat. And whatever must be done to do that, that was his job. Tricky situation, but that's what I played.
Question. Yes, questions. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, just
Much. Very nice to. ¿Está bien? Okay. So thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure too. So my question for you is the next. After your long and very deep experience in your profession and in the business, what would be your advice, tip, even warning to a teenager that's willing to put all his energy and passion and talent into visual/performing art?
My advice would be to do anything else that they could. I mean, we all have a desire, especially when you're young, to give to, but there are many ways of doing that. The most obvious, I mean, we live in a world which is obsessed at the moment with celebrity.
Yeah, I know.
Celebrity is valueless. It means nothing. Mm-hmm. It brings no joy, no pleasure. It mm-hmm. might sometimes get you a seat at a restaurant. Mm-hmm. But it has no value at all. And we are surrounded with this myth that we're giving the new generation that celebrity is something of value. It's not. Yeah. And I think that if you feel you want to give, which a lot of artists do. They want to communicate what they feel in themselves, mm-hmm. and they think, I want to be an actor. There are other ways of doing it. Yeah. Leading companies, doing, keeping a park amazingly clean. I mean, what we need in life are people who love what they're doing and who do it to the best of their ability. And that's what we should be educating our young generation to do, not to want to be famous and to want to act. And it's not all it's cracked up to be. You're talking to someone who is incredibly lucky to be as successful as he is. Most actors are not. Most actors live with the worry that they're not working, that they can't support their family, that they can't keep a relationship together because of the travel they have, that the work they're doing is useless, that believe me, that if I am the tip of the iceberg is nothing like me. That's a bad analogy, I'm sorry.
Wonderful answer. Question just there, yes.
Is there any chance that we'll be seeing you on stage anytime in the near future again? And if so, when and where, and if not, why?
A good question.
Well, there's always Shakespeare. And strange enough, somebody said after Henry IV, it's about time you did your Lear. And I thought, oh, that'd be quite nice. But you see, Jonathan Pryce is doing a Lear at the moment in London, so you can't do Lear for another 5 years. I talked to my wife, Sinead, about us doing something together, maybe in Antony and Cleopatra, or maybe two oldies in Much Ado About Nothing, perhaps. which would be quite fun. So Shakespeare is always there, but I love doing new plays. I think my nature is that of a test pilot, not a commercial pilot. I would rather see if something would fly than be in something that I know flies. So it's a question of people coming to me with new writing and something that really appeals. But I do like if I can, 2 or 3 years, if possible, to do a play.
Yes, just here. Yeah, right there.
I would like to ask you.
Hang on 1 second for the mic.
I would like to ask you, you've been an actor on stage, on movies and on television. Which is the one you like best? Do you have any favorite, or just you like them, all of them the same?
No, stage, television or movies. There really is no difference when it's good. It's a different routine. Playing in the theatre, your whole day is geared towards being at your best form at 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night. So it sort of messes up a lot of your life, that. Movies, you tend to have to travel to other parts of the world to make them, so that, in a way, messes up some parts of your life, but it's lovely to see other parts of the world. So there's good and bad things with all of them. Television, the Borgias is television, but it could be a movie, really. So there's not a lot of difference between those. I've always enjoyed contrast in my life, so I love going from one rhythm to another to another.
Was there another question in the same row? Yes, just there.
No sé hablar inglés, pero...
Wait.
Hang on. Let us suit up.
God. All right.
Unfortunately, I cannot speak
Ya que tengo la
English,
oportunidad de preguntarle,
but I would like to take the opportunity to ask Mr. Onion a few questions. I've got 3 questions, in fact.
A ver,
3 questions.
yo quiero saber algo de su pasado.
I'd like to know something about your past, something about your present, and something about your future. Regarding your past, I would like to know why you rejected studying veterinary instead of being an actor.
I rejected being a vet
Yeah.
because I was hopeless at the sciences at school. But the life I wanted was based on a friend of mine who was a vet, and he would work in the city with little people's pets and things, in fact the Queen's dogs, in the weekday. And then at the weekend, he'd go down to the country of the Isle of Wight, where I lived in the south of England, and he'd look after people's horses and cattle and whatever. And I thought, that's a wonderful way of life. Bit of city, and then bit of country. And he seemed to be a happy man, so I thought, I want to be one of those. Now, I didn't have the mind for science, which you need to be a vet, but I now live a very similar life to that, in that I have a place in the city, and sometimes I work in the city, but I also have a place in the country, and so I found the life I wanted.
Mi pregunta, muy bien.
Thank you very much. Regarding the present, you've just done a documentary film about the environment. It is a criticism for the production of trash. We've talked about this today in this interview, and about raising awareness to in the whole world. It is a big problem. It is a global problem, and I would like to know how you felt in this new role of being a presenter of a documentary film, and did you enjoy it? And are you planning on doing more similar documentary films? Are you planning on other documentary films or activism roles? Are you planning on other activist projects?
No.
Let's get to the future question. What's the future question? Did you have a third question? We have to let other people ask questions. What's your future question?
Corte.
La tercera pregunta. La tercera pregunta ya muy cortita. Es sobre su futuro. ¿Cómo en 10 años o un poquito más?
In 10 years or so more, what will you be working at? You say you like changing and changing the routine and the rhythm. How do you see yourself in the future?
I don't know.
Okay. We are really running out of time, so please keep the questions very brief. Just there. Yes, right there.
Good evening. I'm sorry I can't speak English either. I am a civil servant, so we don't know anything. We can't do anything, basically. That's what people think in Spain anyway. I'm a civil servant at the culture ministry, specifically at the Cinema Institute. So as a civil servant, as a public worker, I am very, very interested in the topic, and I'd like to ask you 3 questions. Well, if you don't want to answer, then you don't have to. How long have you been married? Have you ever thought of getting a divorce? Is there any list of applicants to fill in that position?
Actually, we're finished now, so we can go out on that. What a great way to end! What a fabulous ending. Jeremy?
I've been married to the lady in the 6th row. I can't remember how long. I think it's around 36 years. It feels much longer. Have we ever thought of divorcing often? And is there a list? Not as far as I know.
Well, I have to say, that certainly provided an unexpected end to a really, really delightful evening. Good to get the marital stuff in there. And thank you all very much for coming to this Times Talks, and thanks particularly to Jeremy for being here.